Hi there, it's Brian Sebastian. Movie Reviews and More, the Women's Broadcast TV Network. iTube 247 out of Franklin, Tennessee. And if it's Saturday, it is When We March. So this is a special show because this is interesting. A lot of times I've always know who I may be interesting. I may have interviewed him before, but I've never interviewed this person before. So who are you? Where'd you come from? For those people who marched, who didn't know who you were, you have to introduce yourself to the people who didn't march, who don't know who you are. Who are you? Who'd you march with?
Thanks, Brian. Well, my name is Rob Robinson. I am originally from Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. And I marched, my first drum corps that I marched in was the Tri-Community Cadets of Newtown Square, PA. And the Tri-Community Cadets kind of morphed into a corps called the Keystone Regiment. And the Keystone Regiment was one half of the merger that, of course, made the Crossmen Drum Bugle Corps. So I went from Keystone into the Crossmen. And also in the midst of all that, in 1981, I just needed a little change of pace. And so I went to California and marched with the Blue Devils for a year. And then I returned to the Crossmen in 1982 for my age out here.
Talk about the Keystone Kid. I remember them. If I remember, they were pretty good. I remember seeing them in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. I thought they were okay when I saw them.
Keystone was a really interesting drum corps, and I'll tell you a little bit about how it came about. As I mentioned, I was in the Tri-Community Cadets, which was a really, really small corps from Newtown Square, Pennsylvania. When I say small, I'm talking about, maybe 50 members total. But we were all like under the age of 14. In fact, people that were 14 were like the older kids, And but after the 1971 season, there was another drum corps from Brookhaven, PA, called the Brookhaven Crusaders.
Yep.
And they were having maybe a little bit of conflict in regard to some membership, but they were older and they had some more experienced instructors, including a gentleman by the name of Ray Eiler, who was just a brilliant brass arranger back in those days for small drum corps. So long story short, Brian, a lot of those kids from the Brookhaven Crusaders came to the Tri-Community Cadets. It was almost in some ways like a merger, but it wasn't, because Brookhaven did continue, the Brookhaven Crusaders, they continued as an organization, but Tri-Community really benefited from the influx of those kids. And just to mention, I know people love to hear names, but in that group of people that came from Brookhaven was one Mr. Tom Hannum.
Yeah.
Also, Doug Stemmett, who's a member of the Crossman Hall of Fame. There was a lot of talent, a lot of music majors that were either ready to go to Westchester University or had already started there. And of course, the Keystone Regiment really kind of formed a name for itself in the Eastern States circuit.
It's interesting because for audience members and people who don't know, who never march, at that point you had communities of smaller drum corps, and you're talking about 14, and I'm thinking, I always go by the year. I never remember that I might have been 14 or even 10. And I was like, really, was I? I'm like, yeah, I guess I was, because it's so long ago and you're not thinking about it. What I liked about that at the point, I always remember the World Open. I always remember going to, traveling on our school buses that we modified into our makeshift homes. They would always break down, but not when we went long distances for some reason. I don't know what that was. It was really interesting. But I'll never forget those days, because it was your first time going outside the state or outside your region of things. And anybody who's ever driven through Pennsylvania knows you're driving 4 hours and all you see is these beautiful hills. But you're driving and driving. It reminds me of driving through Texas. But you know what? Pennsylvania has always had so much talent that came out of there. It's just unbelievable.
Well, you mentioned that, and I mean the Eastern States circuit that we all competed in back then. I mean, let's just say you had the Keystone Regiment and the 507 Hornets, okay? Those were the two corps that made the Crossmen. But outside of that, you had like the Belvederes from Schuylkill Haven, PA. You had the Chessmen from Easton, PA, I believe. You had PAL cadets. You had the Young Americans from Newport News, Virginia. You had, I mean, and these are just some of the ones I'm remembering. Just in the Pennsylvania, southeastern Pennsylvania area, we had so many drum corps. You know, it was really quite amazing.
You remember what you know what I remember from the PAL cadets? We used to call them the milkmen because they reminded us they looked like milkmen. So we used to make fun of them, but they used to always beat us. So they were good, you know. But
yeah,
it was funny. Talk about you had family in the Crossmen. What was that like?
You know, well, it's interesting that you bring this up because my father, last night, as a matter of fact, was inducted into the DCI Hall of Fame, which was just, you know, words can't really describe that feeling. And there's such a backstory that goes with that, Brian. And, you know, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about it a little bit. But, you know, kind of to your point, it was really awesome to be in the family that ran the Crossmen Drum Corps. Because, I mean, my house as a kid was Crossmen Central. And
Oh, wow.
it was, you know, it was the office for the Crossmen. It was the parking lot for the Crossmen. And it was also the hotel for all the kids that came in from out of state. So it was a very active place. And we loved it. It was wonderful. I mean, there were some drawbacks to it, you know, but you know, generally speaking, it was great. I always knew what was going on. I can tell you that. I was privy to a lot of information, you know, just because I would hear my dad on the phone with DCI or talking to a new potential instructor that he was going to hire. And so I was pretty aware of everything that was going on. It was a lot of fun, but you know, it was rough because obviously people in leadership come into criticism, and I had to endure that, like hearing criticism about, you know, my dad or my family. But you know, it's part of what you do when you're in a position where,
you know, you talk about that. I remember our director, Mike Brown. We knew he was smart, but you know, we would tease him for whatever. But as a kid, you never know what they have to go through, whether they're regular jobs, putting it all together, and then going on tour. And I remember going back literally like 5 years after I graduated high school, because he still lives in the same house, and just going back and thanking him for what he did. Because you get older and you could appreciate this, you start to understand more. Oh my God, this is what they went through. You just didn't know it because we were kids. We were teasing them. So I could imagine what the other kids were doing, but you were there. So you can imagine all the stuff that was going on with kids coming in and all this stuff. That's amazing because you get that appreciation years later. You really do.
And you're right on point with that, Brian. And you probably, you know, you're speaking as I've heard many of the members of the Crossmen, you know, because back then you're kids and you don't have perspective. You don't have the perspective of life like you're mentioning, and you're just flying off the cuff with everything. You know, everything is a new experience and your reactions to everything are new. But man, I can tell you that over the last couple of years, of course, we just recently lost my mom. It'll be a year in September to cancer. And that's part of the backstory of this whole Hall of Fame with my dad, because she was trying so hard to get him in for 10 years. And she just made us promise her that we wouldn't give up trying to get him in, you know, when she was gone. And here it is, the first time that she wasn't here to try to help get him in, and he got in. And I don't know if you believe in the spirit above, but I'll tell you, you know, that's a pretty magical story there. And I forget where I was going with all that. Oh, you talked about the kids and their appreciation of my parents. And man, I can only tell you that the outpouring of congratulations and accolades to my dad and my mom, over the last, 10 years has been unbelievable. And it's just like you said, people growing up, having a perspective and realizing just what they put out, to make the Corps survive,
One of the things I've always appreciated, I remember being in the Remo booth 2018, the year Santa Clara won, and I was like, you have these people being inducted to the Hall of Fame or being thanked as sponsors, but you never know their backstory. And I always love backstories when I'm talking to any celebrity or something that they're pitching and you get to know them. There's always a backstory that I wish more people got a chance to know. They're being inducted, but you don't know why. Sometimes it's just that name. And you got 3 seconds where that camera is on you and you're getting your plaque. And I'm like, okay, but why? Where did they come from? So I always wanted to know that. So I was always looking at, you always think of the liner notes of the albums I think of. I always go back to 1974 because that year, listening to the Muchachos at Mike Brown's house with our first director, George Bondesmith, I think he had come from New Jersey or something like that, but he might have marched with the Muchachos, I'm not sure. But it was one of those things where I'll never forget how loud, to this day, the Kilties and the Muchachos were the loudest I ever heard off that LP. I still play those shows. And it took me, I only got the shows about 5 years ago that you could probably just hear recordings. I had been asking for years ever since that, because you lose stuff as when you're moving and everything like that. Or like that year was, to me, I thought that was the best year for Drum and Bugle Corps ever, minus Blessed Sacrament, Boston Crusaders, 27th Lancers, Des Plays, Vanguard, and Aragon Rebels, because those are the only corps that weren't around at that point, or they had an off year. Everybody else pretty much had a good year, and I just never got that.
Is that 1972 you're talking about?
74.
74. It was interesting that you brought up the Kilties and the Muchachos, and yes, they were both loud corps. But in 1972, which was the first year of the Keystone Regiment, we went to the World Open in Lynn, Massachusetts, and we competed in the Class B championship. And but we stayed around for the Class A championship in the following night, and the Kilties and Muchachos were battling it out for the top spot in that show. So they were kind of like some of the, aside from Blue Rock, I would say Kilties and Muchachos were like the first two big corps that I saw, that I was like, whoa, that's another level right there.
Yeah, oh, you know what? I got to include Blue Rock too, because you mentioned Lynn Mask or the Manning Bowl. That's where everybody pretty much would get together, and that, they would have that 2 days, which was phenomenal. And then for a lot of people, that would be the first time you got a chance to sleep over to see some of those corps. Yeah. So as soon as your buses rolled in, I just remember who went on, because I wanted to see everybody. So I never got a chance to see Blue Rock in person because they had gone on. And I was like, oh, I hope they make finals. And then when they did, you're like, you may never get a chance to see them again because you might only go up against them once, or you weren't at the same shows. You would just hear about the shows, scores, or you might see a picture of them in Drum Corps News. That's the only reason I ever missed any corps, because we were at different shows, or else I wanted to see everybody.
Yeah.
Talk about when, and I never knew the story of this. Talk about when the merger came and Crossmen came up. How did that come about?
Well, actually, we were just there's some good stories there as well. As a matter of fact, just recently we had a new class, a Hall of Fame class for the Crossmen this year, and there was a gentleman by the name of Sonny McQuiston. And Sonny was the director of the Keystone Regiment in 1974, but he also had some former ties to the 507 Hornets. And so he actually kind of being in the middle of it all, kind of started to hear that some of the older kids in Keystone were becoming really intrigued with DCI, because DCI at that point was only in its second or third year, right? Yeah. 72, so seventh or third year. And so a lot of these kids were starting to, approach their age out. and they said that they wanted to maybe leave and go, go to somebody close that might have been, or maybe even somebody far like the Vanguard or the Kingsmen or somebody like that, or Muchachos who were actually within distance of Pennsylvania. So that could have been a destination point. So anyway, this Sonny kind of started thinking, well, maybe there's a way we can keep these kids if we and he knew that the Hornets and from Norwood were also having some difficulty. So he suggested, started talking to some of the kids and suggested that they maybe come together and make a larger corps that could maybe compete on a national level. And so he kind of initiated the idea. My dad had always been around Keystone Regiment as an instructor and a kind of an assistant director. And my dad had a good business background. He knew how to run an organization. So when everything when the dust settled and all these ideas were put together, both corps agreed that it would be a good idea. The kids were on board from both corps. And it was suggested that my dad become the director because of his experience, drum corps and business as well. And so
that makes sense.
Yeah. So in the fall of 1974, I believe September, maybe late September, early October, we formed a rehearsal at Boeing Vertol Company in Philadelphia, where they had a big parking lot where we practiced. It was affectionately known as Boeing Beach to those those involved with the Crossmen, because it's where we spent our summers rehearsing. Like a lot of corps had a parking lot they rehearsed in, and that was the formation. That was how it all came together. And then from there, the first performance ever by the Crossmen, there were no uniforms, so they used both uniforms from both corps. And it was not a great look. I got to tell you, it was, you had green from the Hornets and you had blue from Keystone, and they just mixed them up, and they went to the Phillies game, the Philadelphia Phillies baseball team, and we did an exhibition at the Phillies game. And then, of course, as the year progressed and we got into 1975, the winter months, the Corps wound up performing at that famous show in North Jersey called An Evening with the Coors. And that was the, where they basically unveiled the gray uniform that the Crossmen wore in its first year. And so, that's kind of like the early days, the very first months. And then, the first show ever for the Corps was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in the spring of, in May, actually, of 1975. And we kind of competed as a bigger version of Keystone and 507. We didn't tour in 1975. We just did the Eastern States thing. We went to the World Open in Lynn, Massachusetts. That was kind of our first big show. And we actually competed in the A class, and we made finals, which was 12th place. So that was a good accomplishment for the first year Corps. And then also we went to DCI and competed, and we were on like first at prelims that year, which was like 7 o'clock in the morning, and we placed 24th. So we did attain associate membership in our first year. So that was it was a very successful first year for the merger.
And people don't realize that becoming an associate member was an important thing. That aligned your tour for the next year and things like that. Because when you to 1977, I played that show, once or twice a week, I should say. I know that show off the heart. So Russian Christmas music, you guys and the Cavaliers, and Santa Clara. But I give credit to you guys because I heard it first through you guys. No, I heard it first through the Cavaliers in 1976, and then you guys played in 77. But it was that X that you guys formed in 1977 because we went on tour with you with the New London Surfers. And the reason we were there is because of the 73, 74 years. How we got to go in 1977 is beyond us when we went at Sortis caliber, because everybody had gone. Most people went to 27th. One person went to one person goes to North Star 78, and then they go to the finals and Birmingham and Alabama the following year. And then our lead sopranoist goes to Madison. So he becomes their lead sopranoist, 77, 78. And that was pretty much it for us at that point. We had no business being on tour with you guys in the Kilties. But I was like, I want to see everything about that show. I know your drum solo by heart. I still know it till this day. What you doing? I stole the way you guys weren't lifting your feet up to the East Line Band in 1979, 80. I said, we're going to march just like Crossmen do. We're not going to lift up our feet. And then they said, you guys aren't marching. I'm like, we are marching. We're marching Crossmen style. And so that's what we did. So we were marching Crossmen style drumline. We were playing Santa Clara, the clock solo. And we had Garfield Cadets, maroon and gold, because that's what our high school maroon and gold were. So we became the Garfield Cadets. But our band director loved drum corps. So he would always take us when kids, and he let me do what I wanted to do because he knew what I was doing. And this is at an all-white high school, if you can imagine that. So I went in telling them, no, stop with the tilted drums. We're going to straighten them up like this, and we're going to do it this way. And I had just moved to the school, if you can imagine that. So I took it over at that point. But the following year, we ended up winning. We ended up going to Jamaica. We ended up being one of the best, the best in, it was called the Barnum Festival in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Connecticut. And we ended up winning that. So that was what we were good at doing. So I never forgot that. So thank you, Crossmen, 1977. You guys molded me till this day. Talk about that year for you. What was that like?
Oh, 77 was, I try never to suggest my favorite because every year was just its own unique experience. But 77 really holds a special place in my heart. And excuse me, I don't think there's any coincidence. I mean, first of all, 76, you started to talk about it. That was our first year that we toured, and we were associate members. So as an associate member, it did give us some financial benefits on a DCI tour, in terms of money and support. But that was the year that we got disqualified. We were part of a little surge on the East Coast of overage membership. But I mean, 77, we rebounded. And I mean, when you go through a disqualification like that, I mean, clearly it could have a profound impact on a drum corps. I mean, obviously the Muchachos never really quite rebounded from 75.
Right.
Luckily, we did. And the Bridgemen also, I would say, rebounded from 77. But in 1977, we acquired the talent of Ralph Pace writing our drill. And not only did he write the drill, but he was there with us throughout the winter. He wasn't just a guy who, mailed in, the drill. He was really with the Corps. He started to create the entity, really, that is the Crossmen. And just everything that Ralph brought was just, you could tell we were on our way to something special. And it was just the right ingredients that we needed as an organization to take our Corps, into DCI and national prominence, and so that was a great year. It wasn't easy. I mean, I can remember feeling like we were definitely something special. The book was great. The music was great. We had a full drum corps. We were on the road. We were traveling. We were winning some shows, but we also, as an inexperienced national drum corps, we got our butts kicked a couple times, and it was tough. And I mean, some of it was down near the end as we were making our way into Denver for championships. And, we wound up getting beat by like Garfield, who we had been beaten throughout the year, or even I can't remember, like the Kilties or the Freelancers. We were all sort of in a bunch with them, trying to fight for the bottom spots of DCI finals that year. And so, it was a little shaky at times, but we kept working. We worked really hard. I will always remember when we arrived in Denver, we were staying at this school. It probably was outside of Denver, but we were practicing one day, all through this day, and then eventually the sun set, and it got dark, and right off to the left or right, however you're looking at it from the school we were staying, there was a gigantic cross lit up on the mountain, like a cross. And we were just like, holy cow, you've got to be kidding. I mean, here we are. If that's not we just it got us all amped up. And so we went into prelims. We did a great show. And I can still remember the moment when George Hopkins and a bunch of people running behind him were running down the street, and we're all sitting in Pizza Hut having lunch, and they were just had their hands in the air, and we were just we knew something good was about to be announced, and they said we took 9th in prelims, and we were in, and of course we slipped back a couple spots in finals, but we that was a great season, just filled with memories. That's one of my most fond memories of '77.
Yeah, mine too, because I was rooting for you guys to get in. I was rooting for Garfield Cadets to get in, and I'm just like, no matter what. And I never forgot this, and I utilize this to this day, was when they put the girls in the color guard into that horn line, and they say amen. I said, this is great. They're going to take that loss of that point or a half point or whatever it was. I said, good for you. And I never forgot that. When you're sticking with something like that and you're going with it and you know the consequences, good for you. And I never forgot that. And I always remember that. So you guys and Garfield, I was rooting for because we were on the same tour. Again, we had no business being on it, but I was like, wow, it's an honor to be with these guys, because anytime we could find you guys rehearsing, I was right there just watching you guys. And I remember those heavy Premier drums that you had, and just the way it was. And then, like I said, that closer, that Russian Christmas music closer, is one of the best closers still to this day.
Yeah.
It just got powerful and powerful and powerful. And
Ralph,
I don't even remember the 78 show because I was still stuck on the 77 show.
Yeah. Ralph Pace really sold that Russian Christmas music and it was the first time ever in Crossmen history. And really, actually, in DCI, I had seen the Blue Devils in '75. They really spread the show visually from end zone to end zone. But we had certainly never experienced anything like that. And man, I agree with you, Brian. When I watch the '77 show, on Facebook, or it comes out every now and then, and I just see the hit in Russian, and it's just end zone to end zone, and man, it's beautiful, majestic,
Where were you in that line? If you're looking towards the stands, where were you in that line?
Okay, so if you're looking at the line from the stands, I was on the left end.
Okay.
So actually, the opposite, if you're looking, But yeah, that was, I played on the end. It was my first year in the snare line. I was 16, and I was playing with some great drummers. Tom Hannum was in that line, George Hopkins, Dale Adair. There was obviously 10 of us. But I'm just mentioning those guys because those are all guys that had gone on to do good things, and they're all members of the Hall of Fame. And a whole list of great drummers. Chris Thompson was in the tenor line that year. He went on to do some wonderful things with both as an instructor for Crossmen and the Madison Scouts. And then we had Eric Landis and Billy Kaufman were our drum instructors. And interestingly enough, both of them, Eric was with the Keystone Regiment and Billy was with the Hornets. And so that was really the longest lasting instructional team to last through from the merger. So that was a really nice thing. And they both were very unique in their own ways. Eric was very finesseful, wrote a lot of flam patterns. Eric was probably largely responsible for what March Slav was a tune we played.
I love that.
Yeah, that's Eric's chart. He wrote that stuff. He wrote some really tough stuff. He gave us our exposure to Aeroscore. Billy was aggressive. He wrote a lot of roll patterns, and we became a great rolling drum line in large part to Billy's influence on us. And Billy, of course, going forward into 1978, we played that drum solo Tico Tico. And,
I love that.
Yeah, we played that for a few years, actually. That's back in the day when you sort of brought things back, you know?
Yeah.
And in 1978, we decided that we were going to do it again, but it needed a little refreshing.
Yeah.
So Billy wrote that whole backsticking section on the end of it that year in 78, and that was really a big sell for us.
When did you decide, getting into 78, 79, that you were thinking about going to California? What did that for you? What did you see?
Are you talking about my choice to go to the Blue Devils?
Yeah.
Well, that didn't actually occur until the 1980 season. I mean, after I went to the Blue Devils for the 1981 season. So I had been in the Crossmen 75 through 80, and I had seen the progress of the Corps just grow every year. I started to, of course, all the kids that we started the Crossmen with, in large part, a lot of them aged out after 78. So 79 was a new challenge. And then 80, we sort of got back on track a little bit after missing finals in 79. But, you know, I knew I had 2 years left to march drum corps, the junior corps. And I had really been following both Santa Clara and the Blue Devils. They were both, I was a fan of both. But the Blue Devils in the late 70s and 80, they were just knocking my socks off with the music they were playing. And in 1980, I just couldn't stop listening to them. And I mean, and it wasn't so much the drum line that I went there for. I went there to be in the Corps. I love the music, the aura that they had on the field. And I loved it. You know, just it was a different look from anything that I had ever experienced. And I just wanted an opportunity I wanted to win, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not gonna lie about it. I went there hoping that I would maybe win DCI. Unfortunately, I didn't, but we were close. We were second, and in '81, and you know, it was a great experience. I mean, I decided to come back in '82 because my family was basically still involved in the Corps. I had been in the Crossmen since '75, and I just couldn't imagine like aging out in another drum corps. It just, I don't think it would have. I think I would regret that if I was sitting here today and saying that I didn't age out in the Crossmen. You know.
And that makes sense, actually. It's just like coming back home in a way. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
And so for us,
I got a great experience. I got to meet some wonderful people. Both Terry Schalberg and Scott Johnson were the drum instructors that year, and I had met them in the previous to getting there. And I mean, Wayne Downey was the horn arranger, and Jack Meehan was there. Mike Moxley was still writing the drill then, and you know, Dave Gibbs, and I mean, all those wonderful names that the Blue Devils, the reason that they're who they are, and these wonderfully talented people. I got the chance to spend the summer with all of them. And, but, you know, I can remember being, you know, back in Pennsylvania after Montreal in '81, and all the guys from the Crossmen Drum line were coming out to hang with me on the weekends, and they were going, "So, you gonna come and stay with us this year?" and I can remember early on, I was like, "Well, I'm not sure yet," and they'd be like, "Yes, you are. We know you're coming in. We know you're gonna stay." So it was great stuff.
Talk about your age out. What was that feeling like to age out? Because I never got a chance to do that.
Mm. Well, 82 was a really good year for the Crossmen. It was, I would say it was the second wave of, like if you look at 77 and 78 as being the peak of the first wave of the Crossmen, 82 was the peak of the second wave. So we had a lot of guys that had been together since 1979. And even though I left for the 1 year, I was back in the fold for 82. Myself, Mark Thurston, Jim Dwyer, Len Taddy, Andy Tamarin in the tenor line, Bob Morrison was playing timpani, Steve Kiefer was in the bass line. These are all people that went on to do some good stuff in drum corps. We were all together, and so it was a good year. Again, we had our challenges at times, but we had some wonderful moments. We were very competitive, not only as a drum corps, but especially as a drum line. And we beat the Bridgemen a lot that year in drums, and that was that was a pretty good thing to do back then because they were pretty hot and they were on a roll. It was a really good year all around. Of course, I was able to come back after I won my third DCI snare individual in '82, and that was a comeback because I had taken second in '81 after winning a couple. So I had to work really hard to get back. And then there was that performance in Montreal where we left it all, we left it all out there. And I can remember, I got a great picture of all the age outs from the drum line right after we finished in Montreal in '82. And it was a wonderful year. It was magical. And to this day, I stay in touch with all 9 of the other snares. And as a matter of fact, we just did a thing back in June where we got together. 7 of us were able to get together at a party at Jim Dwyer's house and watch the Crossmen Telethon, which was a fundraiser that the Crossmen did back in June. So we're still very close. And as a matter of fact, right now we have a picture that we're about to get. Maybe I can turn my computer here and I'll show you. Right up there, there it is, right there. That's a picture of the Crossmen snare line from '82, and we have 10 copies right now that we all have signed because all 10 of us are still, around, and we have a signed picture that we're each going to have so we can get it framed, and that'll be a real nice, memento from '82.
Was Giselle in that line? The woman snare player, was she in there?
She certainly was. Yes, she was
Talk
the first
about
Crossmen female snare drummer.
I'm gonna put a show together with you two, and then one of somebody else, a surprise, probably someone from Santa Clara, because I wanted to do that as a follow up. But talk about winning your first individuals. What was that like when you went to go do that?
Wow, man. That's the one thing about the first. It's like that. The first experience at anything in life is always the best. I don't know, some people might think differently, but it's like your first love, your first drum corps, your first A in, math or whatever, it's just, you always remember those firsts. And, 79 was a rough year for the Crossmen, and we didn't make finals. It was a shock. I hate to be, sound political because I just say, what happens is what happens. You deal with it and you move on. But we were really slated as probably a 8th or 7th place corps going into DCI in '79. So for us to not make finals was a real shock. But, and I remember being very mad and upset, but I turned around the following day and I competed at individuals, and man, I performed with some, you know, some real purpose, and to walk away winning that was, I can't even describe it in words, Brian. It's well, I can tell you that I had admired guys like Rob Carson, Scott Johnson, Steve Coors, guys that won when I was a little kid, you know, when I was, you know, in the years previous when I was coming up, and I liked playing solo snare drum. It gave me a chance to express myself in a different way, and you know, and I wanted to be good at what I did, and so I entered for the first time in '78, and I took 6. It was respectable. And then in '79, I got a little help from Steve Coors, who was teaching on the Crossman line in '79, and he, you know, he gave me some things to play that would kind of elevate my experience, and man, I won, and it was phenomenal. And to be able to do it, you know, obviously feel that sense of accomplishment inside, but to know that I also was able to affect the lift, the joy of my friends and the people I marched with in the Crossmen, because we had suffered a blow the previous day. So it was a really great experience, and one that I'll never forget.
So after you aged out, what did you do after that?
I went right into teaching. I was brought on to be a staff member of the Crossmen for '83, and but I also was getting married in the spring of '83, and in the midst of all that stuff, I got an offer from the Reading Buccaneers Senior Drum Corps to come and work with them. And the more, and I figured, well, I'll go help them out, and maybe I can just do it on the weekends a little bit. And the more I started looking at it, and considering I was getting married and really wasn't sure what life was going to be like, I thought, you know, this actually makes a little more sense for me. And so I didn't wind up finishing the year with the Crossmen in '83, but I became the caption head and arranger for the Buccaneers for that summer. And I went on to spend a lot of years with them, probably 7 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, 7 years, especially back then. These days, not so much. It goes by a lot quicker these days.
Wow. So after your 7th year with Reading, which they had some great years there, then what happened?
Yeah, so we had a couple good years at Reading, really. We won drums, actually, in '84. Almost won again in '85. So we had 2 really, really good lines. In '91, I got a call from a friend in North Jersey, my friend Jim Dugan, who was with a corps called the Bushwhackers. They were another senior drum corps. And they were kind of going through some changes with staff. And he asked me if I would come up and consult with them, which I did in 1991. And Jim and I and the rest of the staff hit it off so well that they thought having me come on and be the caption head of percussion there in '92 would be a good idea. And so I did, and I was there '92, '93, '94 for a few years. And we had some great years there. We won DCA, both '92 and '93. And we had fantastic drum lines. And I got to meet one of my, well, not meet, but march with one of my great friends to this day, Frank Nash. And Frank and I not only are good friends to this day, but we both got inducted into the World Drum Corps Hall of Fame together in 2007.
Congratulations on that. Yeah, I had Frank on the show. That was fun, actually.
Yeah.
And then, so where are you today? What's happening today now?
So a lot has happened along the way. You know, I've kept my hand in on drum corps a little bit here and there. Mostly I still play and do some clinics with rudimental snare drumming. Um, I believe it or not, this is kind of crazy, but I always played in bands. I mean, we didn't really even talk about that much because there was so much to my drum corps life, but I always played drum set, and at one point in time, I was involved in some original bands, and I started writing lyrics and doing some singing, and I just found out that I loved writing songs. And so these days, I love writing and I record. I have a couple albums out, and I'm about ready to start on my third. I live in Fort Worth, Texas these days. Actually, Roanoke, which is just outside of Fort Worth, and I have been talking with a producer and some musicians, and I'm probably heading in to start recording a new album in the next month or so, and in Dallas, and I'm really excited about it. I also work for the Brook Mays Music Company. I'm a educational service representative, so I go into schools and service music departments and rent young students their first instruments, and that's a real joy to see that happen. And I have a wonderful girlfriend that I live here with, Roseanne, who also marched in the Crossmen. And we have a nice little bubble here, and especially during the pandemic that we've been going through, we both have just experienced a lot of joy in art and creating. She's a wonderful artist, and she's always got her hands on some new project, and so we get along real well here, and we're doing really good.
We got about 2 minutes. Give your website for people so they can reach out to you, what you're doing.
So right now, for a while, I had a website. I still have the domain, so you can write this down if you want, robrobinsonmusic.com. And there'll be some things coming to that. There's nothing up right now because I went through some transitions, but I do have a Facebook music page, and it's actually just facebook.com and then /Rob Robinson Musician. And anybody that's friends with me on Facebook, which is my normal page, I can do an invite to my music page. And on that page, I keep a lot of things documented, both from a rudimental drumming point of view. I write some solos still. I love to watch the old videos of the fife and drums, and even some great moments in DCI. And then typically, if I'm doing an event with my singer-songwriter life, I will post that, and I'll definitely be sharing information when the new album starts and that process that's going to take place. So.
Well, Rob, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's good to hear behind-the-scenes stories of how the Crossmen started. I always wanted to know because we're not getting this, and I think it's a lost art. I think everybody's story needs to be told, whether I'm dealing with celebrities or whatever. I look at people in the drum corps world, they're the celebrities that I looked up to. You guys were the ones I was watching. You just didn't know. So it's almost like you going into those schools with the kids. You never know who you're affecting until years later they get a chance to tell you, right?
It's true, Brian. And, I have to say that when we were all kids and we were marching in drum corps, to think that like someday we'd be sitting here on a Zoom session and being interviewed, or that we'd be getting inducted into these Hall of Fames that are just popping up all over the place. I mean, in our wildest dreams, we would have never thought anything like that. We just did it because we loved it. And it was a great way to become friends with people and experience something in music. And so this is just over the top these days. It's amazing that we have the chance to tell our stories and share these experiences. So thank you for asking me to do this.
Well, it's a pleasure because I get a chance to, reminisce of being on tour with you for that 77 season. And again, we didn't get a chance to intermingle. There wasn't time for one. We were staying different places. We'd see each other at a show, but we didn't get a chance to go and talk. You didn't have that introduction.
I wish we could do over like that. Like that's a do over there. Can you give me a do over? Because I mean, it's funny because you think about that, and we were young, and we had fears, and we didn't think that going up to somebody was going to be acceptable or okay. And man, I wish we could all have a couple days back from those days and just be able to walk in and share some stories and and be together back then.
I remember this one thing. I'll never forget it. The Kilties had just the drum line with if you remember the Kilties in '77. They were just relaxed. They had no organization or something. They'd be mulling around talking during retreat. They did that during rehearsal, but they were good. And I just remember going up to the bass player, and he was tall. I go, "How tall are you?" He goes, 6'7". I go, "What's your name?" He goes, "Igor." And I never forgot it because he was huge. And he was the only one there. And there was just, I don't know why I went up to talk to him. I would just always liked him because I always wanted to have a kilt. And then eventually, because of Roddy Piper from the World of Wrestling, obviously, I went to go to Scotland to get my kilt because I never got a chance to march with the Kilties or Madison Scouts or 27th. I go, I want to get a kilt because I first was introduced to Drum Corps. So that's why, and I never forgot that. So that was the only time I got a chance to go do that. And then I remember watching someone from the American flag and the Garfield Cadets of that year. And I just would always just look at them. And that was the closest I could get to people because just due to our schedules. And I never forgot that. So it's one of those things. Now I get a chance to kind of bring people together of what I do, which is an honor because there's not that too many people I haven't spoke to in the world. But what fascinated me is the people who marched in Drum Corps. That to me, I always wanted to do that. Going back to I always wanted to be that announcer. This is what I get a chance to do with our numbers. So I'm always grateful. So again, hearing the stories and how the Crossmen started, talking to you, knowing your whole drum solo and your, pretty much your whole drum licks through that 77 show. I still air drum to it. I get out my drum pad and I pretend that I'm in the Crossmen for that. I'll never forget that. So that's my way of thanking you guys.
Well, thank you. And this was a lot of fun today.
So give your social media links one more time.
You can see me on Facebook, Rob Robinson. I'm not sure what that is, but if you look up Rob Robinson and then you type in Brooke Mays music, that might help to bring you to my Facebook page. And then of course there's Rob Robinson Music. I also have an Instagram page. It's called Sticks and Picks, as in drumsticks and guitar picks.
Okay.
So and you'll
that.
find me on Instagram. I have a Twitter feed, but I don't really use it that much, so it's okay. And it's great. Reach out to me. I love talking about the old days, sharing some stories or hearing about your stories. So by all means, reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
All right. So with that, I got to end. One of my favorite corps in the 70s was the Crossmen. And again, being able to see them, watch them, cheer for them that they made finals in 1977 in Denver, I was so happy for them. And again, I was a fan growing up, marching against them. We weren't even in your class, but seeing you guys with those premier drums, the way you guys marched, the stick levels and everything, I was just in awe still to this day. So with that, I want to thank Rob Robinson. Hey, it's Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, the Women's Broadcast TV Network, ITube 247 out of Franklin, Tennessee. And if you see someone without a smile, please give them one of yours because the world needs it. We will see you next week.